Good morning, everybody. Cowboy here. We have V here, V for Veles. I know this is like everybody's, well, at least a lot of people's favorite show on Rogue. I'm certainly looking forward to it. We have a lot to talk about, but first, go into the description. There is a free algo that I personally built. It's a simple algo, shows you how the sausage is made, and it's from our paid sponsor, AlgoFactory.tech. Veles, sir, how you doing today?
Good morning, my friend. Good morning to all the ships at sea. Today is August 29th. Do you know where your children are? Possibly back at school. Thank you for the kind opening words, sir. And I also enjoy your show quite a bit as well. And remember, Algo is our sponsor. V will join us shortly. Algo, if it's okay with you, I will start with my prepared comments for today, unless you have anything you wish to share with the audience.
One thing I will share is have, as V would say, pen and paper ready, take notes, and be ready to watch this show twice. I will watch these shows twice, and Veles, we talk every day, and I still have to watch these at least twice. So
we do, please. Yes. There is a vigorous level of mirth, humor, and irony going on between V, Algo, and myself. Sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning.
You say a dearth of mirth.
A dearth of dearth. Yes. 3 o'clock messages of "Holy shit! Did you see this?"
Like, why are you awake? Or are you surprised I'm not?
I felt a disturbance in the force. So, as Tom Luongo is fond of saying, we have a lot to cover, so let me jump into today's content. Also, mid-program, I will provide you all an email address for those of you who wish to join us on Discord. You can send an email to this address that I'll give you a little later, and I'll be happy to send you a link that will be good for 24 hours, and then you can get on the Discord page for what do you call it, for Rogue. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Discord, that's fine. Once you activate the link, in case you've never used it before, feel free to just send me a DM, a direct message, digital message, and I'll be happy to give you a hand and explain what you're looking at. And Valley Girl, not to worry, whether you're on this show or you're listening to it, I will be sure to get you the link, compliment of our friend. So, with that. Sith Lord, I'm sure you'll all be relieved to know that Klaus Schwab, formerly of the World Economic Forum's leadership, has been cleared of doing anything wrong with the organization. Last April, a whistleblower accused him of workplace misconduct and mishandling travel expenses. The board of the World Economic Forum hired a Swiss law firm called Hamburger in Zurich to investigate Klaus. Of course, the degree of independence of that law firm is in doubt, given it was the board of the WEF who hired them. Their investigation found Klaus Schwab did nothing wrong, but wait, there's more. An interim chairman assumed the post after Klaus Schwab stepped down, and this was a man named Peter Brabeck Letmatha, a former Nestle executive. Peter resigned that post a few days before the law firm publicly cleared Klaus and stated that the WEF had a toxic work environment, especially towards women. There are rumors Peter was also one of the board members who did not agree with the law firm's findings before they were made public. So where are we now in the world of the WEF? Well, fascinatingly, Larry Fink, the chairman of BlackRock, is an interim co-chair, along with a man named Andre Hoffman, a multi-billionaire and grandson of former Hoffman LaRoche's pharmaceutical firm's co-founder. So nothing to see. Klaus Schwab is gone, and BlackRock and a billionaire tied to the pharmaceutical industry are now leading the WEF. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Important history review, and what do you call it? Algo, I'm going to put a link here in the private chat if you'll be kind enough to post that on the page. Well, gotcha. Just as soon as it's misbehaving itself, because it's... There we go. When I tried to post it, folks, it was just text, and that will do Algo no good. So, at the opening of today's program, please watch a YouTube video who provides a concise overview of what really occurred around the time of the fall of Western Rome, specifically what occurred to the Roman senators after the fall of Western Rome. and we're going to post that. I strongly encourage everybody to watch this when you have a chance. It's a solid overview of the kinds of details that both Matthew Arrett and Ian Burlingame have mentioned in their work. This is truly the world we're living in, and this is a very helpful video to watch.
John, did you want me to put it on the screen or just in the chat?
It's in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you. It's an overview of the history of the Roman Empire and how it leads to today. Now, don't worry, it doesn't start with Romulus and Remus. I mean, it basically picks up when the empire was collapsing. And we've heard this content before, the importance of Venice, Italy, the importance of Switzerland. But it also goes quite well into the mentality and the psychology of those leading families, the way they viewed the world, similar to some of the content I covered last week. So definitely worth checking into. Things in the sky, memory hole item. We still have no believable explanation for why all those objects or drones were spotted nationally in the United States last fall. Inquiring minds want to know. I'll channel my inner Eastern European DNA. Was it a dry test for something, or were they looking for something, among other possibilities? Bright lights in the sky. Speaking of that topic, be sure to go look at the website globalsecurity.org. Under their military technology section, they list various forms of laser weapons used by the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, including those mounted to various forms of drones. They list 25 independent weapon systems across those service branches, all of whom are in use today. Let me say that again. All of whom are in use today. Skynet, here we come. It's stuck. The new U.S. air refueling tanker, the KC-46, some problems the Air Force and Boeing are working to fix. The aircraft replaces the aged and tired KC-135s we've used for decades as an in-air refueling plane. You may recall on prior programs I mentioned being a contractor to the Air Force during the whole selection process for the KC-46. Boy, that was a hairball and a half when the initial award went only to Airbus. We had Boeing representatives everywhere, and their paid Congress people were having kittens. Anyway, as with any new aircraft, you're going to have some bugs. However, in the case of the 46, one bug is a bit embarrassing. You see, the refueling booms are getting stuck in the planes they're refueling. Officially, this has resulted in 3 accidents and tens of millions of dollars of damage. The true figures on both of those, the numbers of accidents and the amount of money, are probably higher. Speaking of Boeing, they're attempting a fast redesign of the refueling boom to fix the problem. The Air Force has said the fix will be ready in 2026, but Boeing has not confirmed that. Loosely said, that means every KC-46 who's flying, if you receive fuel from that aircraft, you may not be able to fly away. But, you know, language from official reviews of the incidents are typically vague. Words like, there was a limitation in the boom control system aboard the plane. Who begs the question, well, what does that mean? That sounds like either hardware or software. Words like nozzle binding have been used. And again, whatever that means, which is a fancy word for stuck. My favorite is a finding that fighter pilots do not understand the KC-46 stiff boom characteristics. Yes, that's always good. Blame the pilot. We've had in-flight refueling utilized by the U.S. military since before I was born. I'm not saying there are no new things to learn for a new system or that there's a need for proper training. But God almighty, if we're having trouble with the refueling boom, what else is going on? A brewing narrative. The full details are not yet available, but there's a story brewing out there. It involves John Bolton, Venezuelan passports in the hands of Iranian nationals, money laundering, Ukraine, and bioagents. I'll cover the latter topic a little later today. It may in fact be the real reason why there are all those warships hovering off the coast of Venezuela, and not because the U.S. wants that sulfur-laden oil Venezuela possesses. You'll often see various reports and studies and things, or the hair on fire crowd saying, well, Venezuela has more oil than Saudi Arabia. Yes, that's technically true, but as we've covered here on Rogue a number of times, Venezuela's oil has some of the highest sulfur content in the world. That wasn't a problem in the 1970s when Venezuela was making money hand over fist. It's a huge problem now because not Japan, not Europe, and not the United States really want that oil because of the sulfur content issue. Sulfur has to be removed now from diesel fuel, gasoline, aviation fuel, and similar. And so if you start with a fuel like light sweet crude out of Texas or Saudi Arabia's fuel, or for that matter, the oil out of Libya, which is some of the cleanest in the world, as far as the limited amount of sulfur that's in it, it makes refining a lot easier. There's only two countries in the world that can refine Venezuelan oil. That's the United States and China. Shipping it to China is just economically not feasible. So I know this sounds a little crazy as far as the thing concerning John Bolton, but recall the behind-the-scenes deals and private foreign policy actions by such notables out of Ronald Reagan's administration like George Bush Sr., Casper or Cap Weinberger, and my always favorite, Ed Meese, whether Motorola or the government in the Levant, both of whom Ed was involved with. Then Barack Obama's administration, and certainly first among all, the activities of Hillary Clinton, among others. What's my point? There's nothing out of the ordinary that one of the Donald's former cabinet folks, John Bolton, may have been running his own interests out of the administration. Noting the rumors in the press, who I believe to be intentional disinformation, there appears to be a bigger story on the back end. Either massive laundering via Iranian officials with Venezuelan supplied credentials, or the Iranians in question were actually assassins in the U.S. targeting high-profile officials. If John Bolton finds himself in a memory care facility or has an accident with a nail gun, we'll have at least part of our answer. Private equity. We'll dig into that world a bit later today, but there is this soundbite appetizer. Private equity firms are continuing to invest in patient engagement technology in the medical sector. You can read that for what it is, automating as much as they can to cut cost by removing the human element. I'm reminded of an IT vendor who offshored everything but the kitchen sink and their support resources. Because of the nature of my work, I was given a different phone number to call if we had a technical problem. For the first time in 20 years of that kind of work, when the recipient of my call picked up the phone, their first statement was, "Who are you and how did you get this number?" What was the problem? Well, you see, there was a small U.S.-based help desk for senior executives, but it was only for U.S. executives because, of course, they're not going to call for support from India or China, and especially be told, well, turn your equipment off and on again and call us back and see if the problem was fixed. The person on the other end went on to tell me the phone number I was calling from was not authorized to call that service group. My response was to give them an account number to identify who I was supporting, and they nearly spit their coffee across their computers and then profusely apologized. So what will it take to get a human being when we're having a medical emergency? Press 1 for English. Ivermectin. We're not dispensing medical advice and always consult a medical professional. That said, many of you have no doubt heard of a growing variety of illnesses or conditions who people believe can be treated via ivermectin or that drug in combination with others. The website Global Research has published a story I posted on Discord's Rogue News Health subpage on Wednesday night. A study led by Dr. Claudia Santos and researchers from two organizations, which included UCIBIO and CESPU, found ovarian cancer treatments were far more successful with ivermectin. UCIBO is comprised of 32 research laboratories and is connected to the University of Lisbon in Portugal. The acronym in English means Research Unit on Applied Molecular Sciences. CSPU is another Portuguese medical organization whose name in English is Cooperative of Higher Polytechnic University Education. Several considerations about this story beyond just the credentials of the numbers of organizations involved in this study. Again, not dispensing medical advice and not a doctor. I do, however, have quite a bit of experience with cancer and immunotherapy approaches that relate to those I've known. There are many public domain articles warning of the dangers of chemotherapy as a treatment approach. I leave that to medical professionals and all of you with your own research and professionals you consult. However, less official sources have already been experimenting with immunotherapy and ivermectin. What's your takeaway? To me, this is the camel's nose under the tent. The researchers have established a clear positive connection with ivermectin and chemotherapy treatments for one type of cancer. They're also calling for immediate clinical trials. This opens the barn door, in my opinion, to two important things: expanding this research into other types of cancer beyond ovarian, and secondly, leveraging immunotherapy approaches with ivermectin, which was not part of the study. I've personally seen the effectiveness of immunotherapy treatments, and on a personal level, am interested to see further data on the topic. If combined with ivermectin, we may be on the verge of one of the most powerful potential treatment regimes for all cancer. Again, always consult medical professionals for your own care. The feds. From my experience and that of friends on Discord, I can safely say the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, and FEMA are in free fall right now. To be more blunt, the resignations, reorganizations, and doubt of their future has caused severe chaos in those agencies, which, as is often the case, we need to pause, regardless of whatever feelings we may have about both of those agencies. And ironically, in my situation, I was a contractor several times to FEMA, and I was working with the CDC during the whole COOF debacle. That said, it's kind of like the alternative minimum tax. You may hate it, you may want it ripped out of the system, but doing so might kill the patient. So the problem is you can't just let the CDC and FEMA collapse. They have to be replaced by something or their duties taken over by others. I know there are people in Washington muttering about the idea of, quote unquote, just letting the private sector take over and or state resources fill in where these agencies used to provide guidance or resources, or especially in FEMA's case, training. That sounds okay if you're the state of New York or California. That's not so good if you're Iowa. However, the truth is the truth. Both of these agencies are falling apart right now. Angels may not be what they appear. Another of those moments of Hollywood playing with your mind, Charlie Manson, who you all may recall from the 60s, was up there at the Spond Ranch in California with his followers doing his thing in the 60s, and the connections with MK Ultra type programs are well established. Among law enforcement and the FBI, what was the nickname for Charlie's girls he used? Girls who provided sexual favors at his direction to compromise the right people or lure them into the group to find the right kind of men. They were called Charlie's Angels. Some of you may recall the 1970s TV show by the same name. That's the powerful making fun of us again. What was Les Wexner's Victoria's Secret lingerie models later called? The Angels. What was Les Wexner accused of doing, just like Hugh Hefner? Using attractive women who were models in compromised blackmail operations. Nothing to see here, folks. Go back to watching college football. This time it's different. In 1979, the U.S. government bailed out Chrysler Corporation. Much was made of that at the time because Chrysler paid the money back. What was part of the backstory about that loan to Chrysler? Well, a couple of things. The first was that AMC Motors, because at that time we had 4 domestic U.S. car companies, AMC Motors was in a lot of trouble and was essentially dying. AMC Motors, as part of the loan agreement, was incorporated into Chrysler, who importantly saved the Jeep brand. Second, the U.S. government had spent years buying Chrysler products for the military as well as government agencies. The last thing anyone wanted was a car company who was also a defense contractor going under. The rumor was that the U.S. government also received some favorable deals from Chrysler going forward on new purchases. Fast forward to today, and the recent 10% stake in Intel by the U.S. government. By the way, that figure of 10%, I've got a real moment for you later today. The U.S. government has a 10% stake in Intel, and I don't think that would occur unless there's a plan. Possible option being, for instance, let's manufacture NVIDIA's better designed and built chips, leveraging the scale of the Intel facilities. Or even better, AI-ready chips with that integer capability who reduces power consumption by more than 90%. However, what occurred this week relative to the government owning other companies? There were several articles that popped up this week that the U.S. government is floating the idea of ownership of large stakes in our biggest defense contractors. Oh, sure, I know the spin and value proposition behind something like that, but at the same time, it gives me a real Berlin 1937 feeling. If you read the definition of government fascism, this is it. Oh, sure, elements of the U.S. economy and government have been fascist-like since the 1950s. Yet, like several other topics we covered, now it's out in the open with a shrug. Mr. Cigar Truth, the Rambler. Oh, the Rambler. Nissan. Mercedes-Benz, aka Daimler, has divested from Nissan. It wasn't a very large stake of the stock shares of the company at 3.8%, but it is very symbolic. Not sure how long until either the Japanese government takes a stake in Nissan or the firm goes under, speaking of having ownership stakes. We're not dispensing investment advice, just noting the market activity. Artificial intelligence in the desert. Saudi Arabia has announced they want to be the world's third biggest AI provider, following China and the US data centers who support the technology. This is not a minor story in the business news. Saudi Arabia or certain leaders within it are technically apex elites, along with the London Corporation and Davos. Last I checked, London and Davos don't have significant data center resources, but Saudi Arabia has the money, the intention, and the planning to make that a reality. RICO, suave. The administration wants George Soros and his son charged with RICO violations, also known as racketeering laws. It only took 20 years, but we'll see what comes of this. I don't see this as purely pandering to the base, who believes Soros is behind everything nefarious in the world, and especially the United States. Equally, as I'm fond of saying, let's not forget the relationship of Lord Malik Brown, who's been directing Soros for some time. I see this more as a warning shot as well to many others who operate this way. The types of people who pay for professional protesters, online attacks, bot farms, swatting efforts, and similar. They're on notice, they may become targets. Particularly those people out there that paid for all those campus protests back in 2024. Private equity. In the 1980s, firms like KKR, Golder, Thoma and Company, First Chicago, Forstman Little, and others were involved in what was called leveraged buyouts. It was also known as mergers and acquisitions, or my favorite behind closed doors, murders and amputations, the latter being an excellent description. Another theme I'll touch on later, we had a host of media who deceived the public. This economic activity was exciting, brave, bold, and even something you could take part in by investing in these firms. Never mind the unemployment, devastation in cities across the country, and raided savings and corporate pensions. Loosely said, those leveraged buyouts bought companies and did one of two things. They either chopped them up and sold off the pieces, or they played financial tricks. Some of those tricks being to raid pension funds or drive up debt. Debt, also known as leverage by people in the finance community, and then eventually bankrupt the company. They could keep the money they secured through the leveraged purchase via bankruptcy protections. This is more than just an ancient history lesson. This is why language, the manipulation of language, and confusing the public is so critical to elites. Note the use of the term leveraged buyouts or debt buyouts. The use of leverage or debt to purchase physical assets or the means to take out bank loans by the acquired assets. This is not simply something that occurred in the 1900s. Those firms still exist, but we don't call them leveraged buyout firms. We call them private equity, and never forget that. The practices of the 1980s still exist, and the firms who created them, but we've rebranded them. Equally in contemporary time, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street Advisors, and all the others have now purchased political power as well. The end game is the same. When we hear private equity is buying homes in large blocks, does that occur because of World Economic Forum and others' desire for a usage-based economy, an economy where you own nothing? Perhaps. Or is it because the homes are physical assets enabling them to take out loans on those properties? Please review the actions of what private equity's been up to lately. Yes, I'm sure some global nonsense is afoot, but rumors and innuendo are not fact. If I was private equity, I might even float that story myself that the industry is denying people property ownership just to hide the truth. In time, when folks are still able to own homes and land, that rumor will die naturally. What leveraged buyout firms, now known as private equity, are really doing is the real question. Again, why are they buying distressed assets in Europe? Because they're distressed. That's what they do. It's the line from Margin Call. They don't lose money. They don't care if everybody else does, but these people don't lose money. V or Alco, care to weigh in?
V, you're on mute, buddy. Well, I'll weigh in. The way I look at that is the picture is so complex, and it's really very strange right now as far as what's going to happen to the financial markets. But homes are homes. That's a hard asset. Now, there's all kinds of questions as to whether or not you can keep it based on laws and things like that. But in the end, if you are able to make a claim to the land, the home is going to be there. It's a hard asset. And if
Yep.
the smart money is buying them, it's a good place to consider, if real estate is your thing. V, what do you think?
No, that's I feel the same way. I think things are in a very touchy situation. We could either enter a realm or a world of total control by the banksters, or we could return to some sort of normalcy where assets can be purchased and bought and held by normal individuals. Because everything that they're doing right now is just ballooning asset prices through the roof. And they're doing that because they're derivatizing it, and it's a bigger problem at large, man. I mean, it's interesting where we are for sure.
Yeah, my overly simplified Veles take is, yes, it's always easy to assume the world's elites just want to take over everything, but it's kind of like the joke about, well, they might take over. It's like, well, on a certain level, they already have. They've been running this since the 50s. To oversimplify, we the middle class and we the little people have to build stuff that has value so that these folks have something to take from us. If they own everything, that's the end of the monopoly game. So my own 2 coins in the pond. From Ukraine to Colombia, we noted a few weeks ago drug cartels had sent their personnel to Ukraine to learn how to be military drone operators. Some of you may have missed the following. On Saturday, August 23rd, we had our first example of what that knowledge accomplished. Drug cartels in Colombia brought down a police military-type helicopter with the use of a drone. Another aspect of the Ukraine conflict popped up this week as well, that being better coordinated and designed for purpose drone-on-drone attacks. Russia is now using hunter-killer drones to take out larger and more expensive drones operating on behalf of Ukraine. Note how I'm wording this. Not Ukrainian drones operating on behalf of Ukraine. From an asynchronous warfare standpoint, this means Russia's using drones that cost about $500 to take out drones that cost between $40,000 to $100,000. All the world's militaries and arms manufacturers are monitoring this closely. Well, and the cartels too, given the cost of a helicopter versus the drone that destroyed it and also took out the crew. Here we go again. There are many who know me who will be angry about this. They just can't let go of the media hype. That's okay. You do you. So let's talk about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. T Swift, after years of bad relationships who fueled her stardom, is finally getting married. Where to begin? First, news of the story appeared on the 26th of August.
Why does that for them?
I know, the joy. Why does this matter? Recall the program where we covered multiple occasions where the number 13 appears in Taylor Swift's life and career, at least as far as her publicist is concerned. 26 is half of 13, and or 2 times 13, get it, a married couple of 2 times 13 resulting in 26. I'd point out that at least this time I made that connection without watching Donut's program first. Then we've had a massive media campaign around this event to promote their careers. We also had that nasty dust-up last fall or last winter when it was rumored their entire relationship was just a media-generating event, including lengthy contracts signed by both. This will, of course, sarcasm, dispel those rumors. Think of the level of sales she's going to get from all the songs produced from the divorce. Omens. We hear the rumblings in the media about good and bad regarding the United States and global economy, and then there are the facts. Here's an important one. Active oil drilling rigs in the United States continue to drop. There are 47 less rigs operating right now than there were this time last year, according to Baker.
What's that number again?
47 less oil rigs.
The joke is on us, folks. Go ahead.
Than the same time last year. And this is from Baker Hughes, who's one of the big oil industry firms out there. Total active rigs in the United States, as I speak to you, are now near a 4-year low, and that is certainly something to be mindful. If we reduce the amount of oil coming out of the ground, it's not because we have solar breakthroughs that no one has heard about, nor is it because nuclear power is about to go so mainstream you're going to have a Mr. Fusion in your kitchen. They are continuing to reduce the oil rig count progressively because they know there will be an economic downturn. Some other facts to keep in mind. Within reason, we can increase the amount of oil coming out of those rigs if needed. Yes, with several qualifications. Can we fire up rigs who've been shut down? Again, same answer, but with a time factor, something to keep an eye on. From Beyond the Grave, just a reminder, Virginia Guthrie, though dead, did develop her memoir before she passed away, and it hits bookstores in a few weeks. The book is called Nobody's Girl, and it will be released in October. Tom Cruise and mental tricks. No, this isn't about his involvement with Scientology, though I'm sure it played a role. Some of you may recall during the COOF the famous audio clip who came out of Tom Cruise having a meltdown on the set of the current latest Mission Impossible movie while it was still being filmed. This is another opportunity to learn the real backstory behind current events. When it occurred, there was a flurry of questions asked. Why did an audio clip make it into the public domain without the studio stepping on it, as they often do in these situations? Was this just Tom Cruise and his ego? Was this a move to restore credibility to Scientology, or a host of other possibilities? Well, we have an answer, and it's from none other than Tom Cruise himself. As you may recall, during the COOF, Hollywood was locked down tighter than a drum, and many studios were understandably concerned if they even had a future. According to Cruise, to keep his studio, who was partnering with Paramount, moving forward with filming, he called other studios and told them that they were in fact filming, when in fact they weren't. The other studios told their leadership things to the effect, well, look, if Tom Cruise and Paramount found a way within COOF to get the film made, why can't we? Then Cruise went back to Paramount and said, look, the other studios are filming. Let's get back to work. Is this storyline entirely true? Who knows? Though the release of the audio of Cruise telling the film crew to shape up because his reputation alone was why they were working does have a degree of truth. Did the exchange between him and the film crew occur as portrayed in the clip? Well, I'm suspicious. I think it was more to lend credence to the idea he and his financial backers were trying to portray. What are your takeaways? Not the least of which is the fact that you can even fool the powerful by playing classic tricks. For instance, Carroll Shelby did the same thing by telling AC in England he had an engine manufacturer willing to put their engines in the AC Cobra frames and vice versa. The problem he was facing was AC in England said, we're not selling you these bodies for these cars you want to build unless you've got an engine manufacturer. He said, oh, I've got Ford, when in fact he didn't have Ford. Then he went to Ford and said, I need those engines because AC's already promised me the frames. He lied to both. They both believed the lie, and the Shelby Cobra became a thing of legend. Even the powerful can be fooled by the classic head fake. Not again. Speaking of Hollywood, and remember, folks, how do you make a magic wand? You make it from wood of the holly tree. Yet more proof Hollywood can't make anything new who's worth crap, so they remake everything else. Just for those of you who may have missed it, they are remaking the movie The Running Man, who originally starred Arnold Schwarzenegger. We're also remaking the Fantastic Four again. We also have another movie in the Predator franchise, trying to squeeze a bit more out of that one. Not to worry, in 2026, we have Scream 7 because the 6 prior films weren't enough. We have Supergirl on its way because we've already abused the Superman franchise enough in the last 3 years. Toy Story 5 is coming. Please recall what I said about Scream 7. And Shrek 5, please note what I said about the other 2 films. Oh, and Daisy Ridley will be appearing in Star Wars, The New Jedi Order. Please, God, don't let it suck. Now,
I'm sorry. That was just great.
every time I see a new movie coming out, I'm like, and they made that in 72. They made it again in 84. And you know, okay. I mean, for God's sakes, why don't we just remake The Godfather and Citizen Kane? I mean, hell, I mean, what's the point?
I've got a whole, we'll chat offline. I have a whole theory behind all that.
Now to what I said at the opening of today's program. For those of you who need to get, need to get a hold of me, I'm putting it in the chat. You can email me at that address at 1917veles@gmail.com. And then I can get you on Discord, and or if you have questions about the content or other things we do here on the show, just let me know. So, main course, vision. When I was a kid growing up in the Midwest, 2 experiences were important to me when it came to my eyesight that always stayed with me. The first was the first time I put on fishing glasses. Depending on the water and the amount of sunlight at the time, you would swear you can see all the way through the water to the bottom of the pond or the lake. The other was when I paid a lot of money as a high school student on a pair of Bolé skiing sunglasses. Again, their ability to cut through glare and even heavy snowfall during the day was almost a religious experience. For each of these pairs of glasses, I'd put them on, take them off, put them on again, and note the difference. For you fans of the movie They Live, not at that level, but for my age and demographic, it was still pretty intense. The same is the case, my friends, as we consider the long historical narrative by people like Matthew Arrett or E.M. Burlingame, among others. That being the fact the Roman system and the Roman senators never truly went away. Nor is it that these are simply their descendants and they've just, maintained wealth and influence. One of my narratives as Veles in my roughly 5 years with all of you has been the following. That being, you cannot sustain influence, power, and control without institutions. Call it government, religion, faith, superstition, the secret police, or the military. It will not survive generational history without institutions and various practices they follow. This goes to my program about the Human Interference Project, which at some point I'm going to have a redo of that one. The only way in that example to prevent people from opening sealed nuclear waste containers 10,000 years in the future was through a religious belief system. How does all this apply to decades of history concerning the Donald, the people backing him, and our general global situation? Among its many purposes, our global media institutions are in the business of keeping us confused, occasionally depressed, and a willingness to lash out at their selected bad actor. Tragically, when I wrote this segment, the events of Minnesota had not yet occurred, and it does make my point. The end purpose is the same in keeping the global population unaware of what's going on. It was how the Romans did it, and little has changed. That's where ESW Rogue, among others, comes in to provide illumination and as a set of high-quality optics to wear. To that end, let's look via the right optics about what's occurring at present. First, if you trace the Donald back to his earliest days in real estate and self-promotion, you'll see the last 10 years as a form of long game for him. At the same time, he's a for-hire resource like many others in the public eye. In my opinion, he set out for himself a long-term plan for building a form of empire for himself and his family like many before him. At the same time, I believe he's always known who the major players are. Said another way, no matter what he accomplishes, he'll be on somebody's payroll, and they are as well, because that's how the system works. Being average people on this planet, we want to view him and others in terms of good or bad. As we often say on Rogue, that doesn't exist to the elites. They do what they do because they're operating on another level with a completely different belief system and set of rules. This is a form of truth about Jeffrey Epstein as well. Whether elites knew who and what he was, and they most certainly did, on a certain level, it didn't matter. He was just another asset out there among elites. Case in point, if you know Jeff Epstein creates blackmail for hire, then what's to stop any elite from hiring him? He was essentially a blackmail mercenary. To use Tom Luongo's worldview, apex elites are like players at a table of a very big game. Depending on the dynamics of the game, sometimes players work together and at other times not. It isn't personal, it's just the way that game is played. We, the average people, have a longer sense of loyalty than our apex elites colleagues do. Loyalty to them is only based on long-term goals. Now, here's a little known but important fact. A long time ago, the Donald was able to bring a form of peace to arguing mafia families in New York. The goal was, if they were no longer in conflict with each other, it'd be a lot easier to conduct smoother real estate construction and carry out those deals, because those were the same people often providing the building materials, not the least of which was concrete. Eliminating conflict among warring parties was good for business among all concerned. Any of you who read the material by George Webb are familiar with this detail. How did the Donald pull this off? Well, beyond his negotiating skills, and importantly, the team of people he always keeps around him, he was very reasonable. He let the arguing parties keep most of the money from the new ventures once the conflict was resolved. He just wanted 10%. Said another way, he became a peacemaker among very dangerous people for a small fee. Small when you consider open warfare and a loss of economic opportunity was the alternative. So if we put on our high-quality optics again, when viewing his meetings in Alaska with Vladimir Putin and in Washington, D.C. with Zelensky and European leaders, we have a very different understanding now. Further, we have one who makes a lot more sense given this model. In our Roman-inspired system, millions can die or millions can benefit from the results of peace, but that isn't what matters. We care who lives and dies. But particularly to apex elites, it's just the cost of doing business. It's just the cost of the game. What matters to them is the system they operate remains intact, and the feudalism among the elites who sustain it. And for those of you who've heard my programs before, that's at the heart of what really happened to JFK. For a 10% fee, there's a guy who can be leveraged to stop the fighting and shift things in another direction. I also would propose we view those conflicts he's been involved in resolving versus those he hasn't. You can make money by bringing peace to Ukraine, for instance, but there's no money to be made by bringing peace to the Congo. So the Congo continues to bleed. Within this storyline, there's something I think who's misunderstood. This concerns the tariffs. It was certainly my belief the activity around the tariff fight globally was to adjust the global trade environment to a new model. But there may also be more going on. U.S. aid, among other mechanisms, were shut down and the flow of money to a lot of people globally stopped. Then if that wasn't enough, the cost of their imports went up and exports dropped due to the tariff arguments. That's more than an economic shift. That's big-time international pressure just without the missiles and the submarines delivering it. Or as several commentators have stated throughout the year, it was either going to be a global shooting war or an economic war. And no matter how bad that economic war gets, you want this resolved that way rather than with bombs. The tariffs, among other things, were part of a campaign of pressure to get several warring parties to agree to something else. The truth about U.S. aid was we shut off the money to put Europeans under immense pressure. Gary Webb. A bit more on the newspaper reporter Gary Webb. We've covered Gary on prior programs. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, the backstory is as follows. Gary was a reporter for the San Jose Mercury News who ran a story connecting U.S. intelligence to the drug trade. There was a movie about him called Kill the Messenger, who starred Jeremy Renner. There's been a hypothesis put forward Gary Webb was murdered by people who destroyed him. The sad truth was relayed by the Zeller brothers on the Quite Frankly program earlier this year. That being, Gary sunk into such depression when he shot himself, the bullet ricocheted off the top of his head and he had to shoot himself a second time. The Zellers are not idle spectators or purely theoretical on this topic because they were working with Gary before he killed himself. They were trying to get him the mental health care he needed. One of the books I'm reading has further details on Gary and frankly even more fascinating detail about him. That book is Clinton, Bush, and the CIA Conspiracies by Sean Atwood. I would also like to point out that Sean Atwood has to publish his books in the UK as he's forbidden from entering the United States. This book is his fourth installment in a series he refers to as The War on Drugs. Returning to Gary specifically, he grew up in Indiana and went to college in Kentucky. Even out of the gate, he was hitting a particular theme with his reporting. 1980, he contributed to a series called The Coal Connection concerning the murder of coal company president that he and his colleagues felt was killed by the mafia. That work received an award from the Investigative Reporters and Editors Association. Gary was diagnosed early in his life with depression, and this contributed to his death many years later. After moving to California and working for the San Jose Mercury News, the controversy continued when he wrote an investigative piece about the California Department of Motor Vehicles, namely that the software they were using had cost millions of dollars and didn't work correctly. He didn't stop there, as by 1994 he was working on what he called the forfeiture racket, this being property seizures by law enforcement relating to drug cases where the accused had not yet been found guilty, but yet their assets were seized and sold. Some of you may recall my prior comments about Congressman Jim Traficant, who took this problem to its ultimate outcome nationally. That being, Traficant was able to have a line item added to a congressional bill stating federal agencies couldn't seize people's property without a court conviction first. All this property seizure at the local and national level was a huge moneymaker for law enforcement and others for years. Gary Webb was one of the first people who hammered this topic in the media. In fact, his articles were so effective, the California legislature of that era rescinded the property seizure authority of law enforcement. The net of this is Gary was not a flash in the pan because of his work concerning narcotics trafficking in California. He had a long-running track record of excellent investigative reporting, not to mention loyal readers of his work. It's because of that, by the time he produced his famous piece about the connections of narcotics trafficking to the U.S. government, he had to be stopped. The other thing Webb did, who's missing in stories about him, is this. When Freeway Rick Ross was on trial, one of the witnesses against him was Oscar Danilo Blandon, Rick Ross being a famous and well-known drug trafficker in Southern California. He was one of the biggest cocaine and crack distributors in LA specifically. Who was Rick's supplier? Well, it was Blandone. Why does this matter? Government prosecutors tried to make Rick look like he was ground zero in cocaine distribution in Los Angeles, whereas Rick said he was, and I quote, just an elf in Santa's workshop and Blandone was Santa Claus. But Rick's lawyer didn't know enough about Blandone and his relationship with the U.S. government to cross-examine him. The guy who helped that lawyer understand the kinds of questions needed to be asked of Blandone in court was Gary Webb. The prosecutor in the case desperately objected to every question and was overruled by the judge. Why? Because armed with the correct kind of questions to ask Blandone, it came out in court testimony, which means now it's in the public record. Blandone was working for the CIA and DEA and had been for years. He's one of the biggest cocaine distributors in the entire United States and not just Los Angeles, and he'd been on the government's payroll during that time, which means there can only be one conclusion. Elements of the U.S. government were running the drug trade, period. They couldn't kill Gary Webb, so they assessed their target and instead drove him to suicide. Your power bill. We've discussed the impact of computer data centers, and especially those supporting AI and their role in driving up power costs. That is a significant factor, but it's one of several factors involved we need to cover. Other contributions include the geographic location of data centers. Simply said, some locations are better than others when it comes to power availability, regardless of cheaper real estate or labor costs. Case in point, where are the data centers or other high-demand power industries who are not struggling to secure reliable power? They're the ones located near a diversity of power sources, including nuclear, hydro, and traditional power plants. You'll tend to find higher costs and bigger challenges for large power users who rely on power grids powered by a single source, like coal or natural gas. Speaking of natural gas, after years of very cheap natural gas, costs have been increasing. Specifically, LNG, liquefied natural gas costs, have risen by a factor of 7 in the past 7 years in cost increases, which is another major contributor to rising power costs. The other thing to keep in mind with these power costs is the higher power demands reveal what was previously hidden. Not hidden in some dark conspiracy, but just the way it is. Did the right people at the state, federal, and local level know there were vulnerable areas in our power grid? Yes. Did they do anything to correct it? No. For the same reason, we're 2 decades and counting and still haven't hardened our power grid from power outages who are fixable. But the speed of deployment of data centers and the huge power needs have revealed those vulnerabilities rather magnificently. What, according to oilprice.com, is the big deciding factor in keeping power costs lower or even stable? Well, it's nuclear power. Yet another reason we on Rogue have been discussing with you for 2 years now development of micronuclear reactors, who is backing them, and activity in that space. My thanks as always to N.A. Knight on Discord for the oceans of data that he's provided on that site, including the sudden surge of legislation approvals by federal agencies just the last 2 months as we start rolling out nuclear solutions into the grid after years of people terrified of allowing any form of nuclear power. Please also note what I said earlier about the reduced oil rigs, because part of that is reducing our access to natural gas. The grid and more grid. Speaking of the power grid, we have some additional color. Noting a theme on several of our programs, we have the Hegelian dialectic live and in color when it comes to the following. If you're powerful and you want to make a lot of money, you determine a goal, how you're going to achieve that goal. Then you create a problem who appears insurmountable. Then when many stakeholders demand a solution, you give them one. The solution who enables you to achieve your original goal. 2 seconds. When we began 2 years ago and pointed out several factors who were all related, it spelled a complete restructuring of global power grids. First, a lot of money was spent on green energy initiatives, all of whom use technology who's vulnerable to disruption, easily damaged, and whose return on investment was negligible at best. The people who made money off those initiatives are often the same people who will benefit from phase 2. Second, renewables came up short, and for some ungodly reason, we shut down nuclear power plants in Europe. Third, key powerful players began investing in both large-scale and small-scale nuclear technology. As noted on prior programs, the small-scale stuff was already on the shelf. We'd been using it on space probes and for the Navy for years. What happened now is we've reached a point where letting these approaches mature into something for commercial use was desired. So now we have Bill Gates out in Kemmerer, Wyoming, along with others in U.S. states, developing their own proprietary versions of these nuclear technologies. In our lifetime, in our timeline, we now have further strain on power grids caused by environmental concerns and alternative energy approaches, and a huge power demand for many sources, including the ever-popular AI data centers. Right on time, as it's been done so many times before, we now have media resources priming the public to accept and demand these solutions to fix these power problems in the power grid. It began in the IT sector and other publications discussing the IT sector laying out to the public the demands of AI centers and AI systems and what were we going to do about it. Then in the last few weeks, I've noticed articles appearing in publications who focus on the power industry, including publications with specific focus on manufacturers of generators, transformers, and related. New Scientist magazine this week stated a story to the effect, well, wait a minute, maybe cold fusion does work, unquote. That's not a joke. Then Power magazine has published several articles focused on two primary themes. The first, specific problems in the grid, including transformers, cables, and related infrastructure. One article I read pointed out that while everyone is focused on generators or sources of power generating, we're forgetting how critical transformers are. Something who's true, of course, and I've shared on prior programs how long it takes to build transformers. The article pointed out there's a way to detect if transformers are beginning to fail and need maintenance or replacement. That method is to detect higher than normal hydrogen levels around the transformers, because as they begin to fail, the units emit increasing levels of hydrogen. Then the article went on to point out several media stories about the single point of failure transformers have already represented in several countries around the world. The second being improved methods for power output, including, yes, we need nuclear, we need it now. Some of you may recall the clips from Dave Collins' interview on Tucker Carlson we showed last week. What did Dave say on this topic? He said AI was the Trojan horse used to get the public to buy off on a massive nuclear power build across the U.S. Given prior history, we should next have popular TV shows where characters discuss a power grid problem and someone should do something about it. Stay tuned. I feel sleepy. I want to thank George Webb for the following possible hypothesis of where the following data takes us. This historical event is one of those eye-opening moments where a bunch of things fall into place. Note my regular commentary about you have two different versions of crazy things in the news and neither is usually correct. Within the realm of things like MK Ultra and all things covert was another side project. Also recall the program the programs where I've discussed a couple of times the difference between what is program management versus what are projects within a program. While the MK Ultra program and its sub-projects were working on weaponizing LSD and similar or compromising people in brothels, we have this side project. There was a lot of time and money spent on aerosols. How small can we make a chemical or biological agent that can be used in the field, up close, or in a building, and it's still effective? They began working on aerosol weapons in earnest following World War II, thanks to some people who came into the United States from our former enemies. How bold were some of their trial runs? Well, they had folks with fake credentials pretend to be maintenance personnel at the Pentagon and replace the air filters in the building. The air filters were impregnated with various aerosol agents who carried flu and similar. Officially, the CIA explained the tests to those who needed to know as a vulnerability test of U.S. facilities. In fact, that's not what they were doing. They didn't want to kill anybody, just determine how much agent affected how many feet of the building and to what degree did people get sick. If anyone tried to complain or ask questions from 1949 to 1952, the cover story was floated that it's just a seasonal illness. No one at the Pentagon, regardless of rank, importantly, had any clue what was happening. Where else were they testing beyond government buildings? Among other sites, they tested these approaches at universities and airline aircraft cabins. Also keep in mind the initial experiments were roughly 75 years ago, so how much further has this approach been weaponized? With all of that now reviewed, let me offer the following. Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 and all the various back and forth about the captain of the plane, the co-pilot, why were Iranian intelligence agents on board with fake passports, was there some weird cargo on board requiring the plane to be destroyed, and the list goes on. All of that is secondary to the following regarding the method. Was MH370's pilot, co-pilot, and passengers neutralized with this already tested method of delivering aerosol agents through cabin air filtration systems? You see, among the many theories out there is this narrative about the pilot incapacitating the passengers, and he just let the plane fly on a straight course till it ran out of fuel. There are many other ideas out there about what happened. For me, though, the idea of an aerosolized agent released at the right time meets a lot of the factual data about the incident. Now for answers on the bigger item of why. There have also been resources and the means to do wild stuff by intelligence agencies. If indeed it was leveraged for this specific aircraft, the why must be seriously important. Quick sidebar. You all remember when that U.S. military team was in China when the coup first began? They flew back to the United States and were sick as soon as the plane landed. The official narrative was they picked up the disease in China. Air filters, anyone? I'm not saying it really was Fort Detrick who developed it. I'm just offering a question before it becomes a hypothesis. With that, I yield the floor. Gentlemen?
Yeah, I took a couple of notes. Going back towards the beginning of the show, there was this business of Bolton and what's going on with raiding his house and all that. Apparently, the investigation into him started under Biden. So there have been some interesting conversations out there that a lot of what Trump is doing, like everybody thinks it's this huge departure from prior administrations, and everybody thinks he's coming to save us. It may be that the wheels being set in motion were set well above Trump and set some time ago, and he is the hatchet man brought in. I think a lot of people need to come to grips with that possibility, and this is a microcosm of that. As far as the micronuclear, which you just talked about a few minutes ago, the infrastructure does seem to be like the infrastructure play seems a lot more simple rather than if you're going to look at it from a financial, maybe, like an investment standpoint. We don't give investment advice here, but I'd be looking into the types of more conventional and simple materials that are commonly known to be used in such things, and like copper and so on. And maybe you can comment on that. As far as the actual reactors, I think Rob B was talking about rhodium being pretty important, and V, you got your unique view on platinum as well as rhodium. There was an article in Zero Hedge predicting a 20% rise in gas demand by 2050. I think it might be greater than that. Throughout history, anytime a new type of energy has been added, the old type has not been taken away, and it's, as a matter of fact, increases. And natural gas is extremely plentiful in the U.S. So I would consider natural gas. Just don't think that's going away. And the last bit, you mentioned the aerosols in the airline cabins before I could get to it, but there has been a startling increase. I don't know if there's an increase because we have social media and it's always been going on, and now we're hearing about it. But I'm seeing a lot of people getting in fights and acting a little bit crazy on these airlines. And I'm wondering if some selective type aerosol has been put into play that might activate people who already have a predisposition to strange behavior. But
that is a fantastic idea. I hadn't even considered that.
Yeah, because I think they're getting pretty good at tailoring things. We have the recent Pew Pew that we covered yesterday. I don't know if, just a quick note on that, they found out that the Transformers guy who did the Pew Pew in whatever that Catholic school that he shot up
in Minnesota. Yeah,
in Minnesota. Thank you. His dad's been working for like high level CIA for a long time, and I think his mom is.
Look at that.
Yeah, it's I'll see if I can find it. It's in the Discord. Somebody posted. I think I posted it, but I think somebody else also, noted it, put it in the Veles channel. So his dad, I think, was a high DOD and CIA contractor, if memory serves. I'll have to go back and here it is right here. Minnesota transgender killer's father has worked 29 years as a top level CIA DOD contractor per reports. And that's in there. And on who else responded to that? Cave Toad says in there, you want to know the better part? His mom is a child psychology therapist.
Wow.
She also was the one who signed when he was 17, I think, for his surgery and treatments to shift his gender. There's a lot there. Again, honor among thieves, trust but verified. There's a lot there that has to be confirmed.
Yeah.
The thing that rolled into my brain is also I was promoting Discord, folks. As I was reading those exchanges on Discord this morning, because I also made a comment shortly before we went on the air with the show. I'm getting real flashbacks to John Hinckley Jr., which even as jaded as we are, folks, at Rogue, when the third or fourth source said, well, here is undeniable proof, 15 different, key resources that confirm the following, that John Hinckley Jr., the man who shot Reagan, his dad was involved with MK Ultra for years. His brother was involved in the defense community. There were a whole host of people even who were willing to entertain these ideas who said loosely, but what kind of a person signs their own kid up for basically being an assassin or being mentally conditioned to do things? And of course, if we were to delve into Bryce Taylor, thanks for the memories, her book about Bob Hope, which at this point, I mean, I'm not going to say 100%, but in my brain, we've moved from hypothesis into theory about Bob Hope, among others in the Hollywood space, being handlers for certain people who were trained to have certain skills. John Hinckley Jr., unfortunately, is not the first person who came from a family that had connections in various parts of government, who later basically found themselves used as an asset. And when I look at the shooter in Minnesota, and again, I'm not blaming the parents unilaterally. It's just we have a lot of data points that are creating a picture outside of the official narrative between left and right about, you need to be understanding about people's self-identification versus anybody who thinks that way is evil. None of that is what we should be paying attention to. We need factual confirmation of, I was a DoD contractor. A janitor is a DoD contractor. We need to get more detail about, if possible, who was he working for? And are we talking about psychological programs? Are we talking about weapons programs? Are we talking about research? What exactly was his dad involved in? Same thing with the mom. And I'll go there. Do we have weird connections to Bill Gates's foundations or something else? And if I understand correctly, that child of theirs, the boy who carried out these acts, was a firstborn son. And we've covered that topic as well, which, again, I know some of you might roll your eyes at that or shrug at that. I also struggled for years, with a mountain of data sitting on my desk. And it's like, I just can't let myself entertain that idea. But it's like, I've gotten to the point now. I'm at the point now that Donut could say aliens are running our brains. And I'd be like, okay, sure. Cool. I'll go with that.
Yeah,
just because so much of his focus on gematria, number alignments, what is this now? The second, third Super Bowl we've had, we're even on our Rogue programs, we've gone into depth about this advertisement, this part of the entertainment at the halftime show. It's just one giant chessboard, literally, not figuratively, literal chessboard of communication of esoteric ideas and ancient belief systems and all sorts of other stuff. So, and of course, this is I can't recall exactly, but this is our second school shooting of a specifically Christian identified, in this case, Catholic, but same in Tennessee, either last year or earlier this year. And that was another one where I'll go there on our Rogue program. I made a comment to all of you, and I think we had to have me on a Tuesday or Wednesday or something because I had something else going on Friday. But the net of that was, I remember vividly, because it scared the hell out of me. I had a program where I said, hey, look, we have these celestial alignments. It's a little bit more than normal. Hell, I don't know. I laughingly said, look out on this date. Something may happen. And then we had the damn shooting on that date in Tennessee. And it's like, okay, I need to slow down on the amount I'm listening to Donut here because holy shit. But it's like, this is the, and again, why do you attack schools? Because the children are defenseless. And in this case, if the reports are indeed correct, they were just shooting through the windows into where the kids were holding a religious service, which in certain circles is a mocking or a repudiation of certain beliefs by causing harm in the practice of those beliefs. So you've got young children at the first Catholic Mass at the beginning of their school year being attacked. So I mean, there's just a lot there. There's a lot there, and again, it's been said by many. Are we going to get any medical records out of this? Who knows? How many times have those been FOIA'd or requested from officials, and we haven't seen crap? Who knows?
Well, I mean, I think SSRIs and other such meds are pretty standard after such surgeries.
Oh, yeah. Well, and Robert Kennedy made the comment after the shooting took place that, now again, the statements of politicians. But Kennedy made the comment yesterday that he's like, he wanted his agencies to start looking into the SSRI topic, which we've covered that on Rogue, and there are many others out there who've covered it far better than we could or we have, who've said every single time you have one of these violent events, there is strong data before it's taken out of the public domain that these individuals are on these mood modifying drugs. But even more than that is, and this has been proven repeatedly, this is not just an idle comment I'm about to make, pharmaceutical firm attorneys. Many occasions it's been proven because it's like, we want the records, you can't have them. Why? Well, because they're now sealed by a judge. Well, who made the request for the sealing of the records? It's like, well, it's Pfizer, it's Moderna, it's whomever. The pharmaceutical industry sends their attorneys in whenever there's a patient who goes sideways, and they seal those records.
Yeah, to quote Frank Herbert as the God Emperor Leto II, it's actually the absence of a thing that can tell you as much about a thing.
Yes. Well, and that's at the heart of the. I know some of you may chuckle, but that's at the heart of some of the folks in the UFO community. Was, okay, stop trying to go through the front door of what happened at Roswell. Let's start asking for what do you call it? Annual appraisals of people that were serving. Let's ask for records of supplies going into that base. Was there a surge in everything from pencils to toilet paper going into the Army Air base in New Mexico? And then lo and behold, what did they find? Oh, those records are sealed too. Well, that's odd. Since when is toilet paper a national security matter? But to Algo's point, the absence of the absence of a thing says a lot. V?
Very well done, sir. Very, very well done. I want to thank Veles for showing up and putting on his clinic as usual. Folks, if you haven't, if you listening in for the first time, I always tell people, go back, get a notebook handy, get your dark roast ready, and listen to this program again. And I want to thank Cowboy for hosting and doing a phenomenal job. I want to thank all you all for listening in. Enjoy your weekends. Is it Labor Day weekend?
It is, sir.
Yes, sir. Monday off.
That's right. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend, folks. With that being said, we're over and out. Cheers, everybody.